and I'm happy to introduce you to our special guest, Carol Boston Weatherford, award-winning author of books on African American history for children and young adults. And she accepted our invitation for this exclusive event for study group members due to her respect for your efforts this year. And most importantly to me, Carol is the author of books that have changed my children's lives. I am so grateful for her book on Schomburg that uh, because I've gotten to speak at the Schomburg Center, I was able to read this book and have my kids know where I was going to speak. And her book on Fannie Lou Hamer. And I believe you also wrote did you write When John Was a Jazz Giant?
I sure did.
Oh, my son's name is Miles, and I had to teach him about the great jazz artists, and that one was just touched our family. So thank you so much for everything you've given the children.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And, Before John Was a Jazz Giant is one of my books that's been banned.
Oh my
Why,
goodness.
why would that book be banned?
Oh, that breaks
Why?
that really breaks my heart. That
Yeah.
is telling of what kind of society we're living in, a book that has given my kids so much joy. Wow. Well, let's jump into the questions. I want to begin by asking you what led you to focus on writing Black history for young people with a focus on stories that are typically left out of the curriculum?
I'm going to break that question in half. I'm going to answer first what led me to write for young people. My children led me to write for young people. When I began taking my toddlers to library story times, they were introduced to a new crop of what were then called multicultural. They're now called diverse books. And I was really happy that there were more diverse books for them when they were growing up in the 90s than there had been for me when I was growing up, because there were very few for me growing up in the 60s. So that's the first part. The librarian shared a book called Tar Beach by Faith Ringgold, and my children loved that book, and the book made a light bulb go off in my mind. At that point, I was writing poetry for adults, and it dawned on me that perhaps I could write for children. And so from that story time on, while my kids were in story time, I was in the nonfiction section looking for reference books about how to write for children and looking for uh, mentor text in the juvenile section that I could study and perhaps build a career as a children's book author. And it kind of worked out. Now,
Yeah.
once I embarked, I was already writing, when I was writing for adults, I was already writing about historical subject matter. And I suppose I wrote about that because, for one, there was always a grandmother in the house when I was growing up. So there was that sense of, living history. And my family had a farm that had been in our family on the Eastern Shore since Reconstruction. And I became aware of some of that history when I was growing up. And my parents exposed me to both art museums and historical museums and other cultural institutions. And I just had a thirst for history. It was kind of, I considered myself an amateur historian, I guess. And so once I started writing for children, it soon became my mission to mine the past for family stories, fading traditions, and forgotten struggles that center African American resistance, resilience, rejoicing, remarkability, and remembrance. So I
Yeah.
wanted to fill in, some of the gaps in my own knowledge, and in so doing, pass that knowledge on to children.
Ah, that's beautiful. Thank you for telling us that story. It's inspiring me to want to do more writing for young people as well. Um, what themes or insights emerged from your books, and which of those themes do you think are vital for today?
What thing? Well, the theme of resistance, of course. Um, the topic of enslavement and segregation. I have an annotated bibliography of my work that I was asked to by a friend to compile, and that friend is a li was first a librarian and is now the director of the Dallas African American Museum. And he said, Carol, you need to put together an annotated bibliography that is set up like a timeline rather than in alphabetical order. And so I did, and what I found is that I had covered quite a sweep of African American history. So, the themes, I'm not limited, to any one historical period. But there the themes again of resistance and resilience, um, transcending oppression, fighting oppression, enduring oppression, and achieving against the odds. So, my work tries to show children how, well, or tries to lift the ceiling off of young people's dreams, to show them that if Leontine Price and Lena Horne and Paul Robeson and Henry Box Brown could achieve in spite of the odds against them, which are far greater than the odds that we face, even though, we're in a regressive time right now, that today's children too can set their sights high and achieve their goals.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for lifting that ceiling for so many. And we have an incredible group gathered here today with us. These are some of the most dedicated educators and teacher educators and librarians around the country that are refusing to lie to kids, right? These are educators that are teaching for Black lives despite these regressive era that we're in. And so I wanted to ask you why it matters that the teachers and authors and librarians bring people's history to young people.
Well, I believe that young people not only deserve the truth, but demand the truth, will demand the truth. I believe that children are not too tender for tough topics, thus the topics that I tackle in my books. And I believe that children will know how to they know injustice when they see it, and will know how to interrogate injustice. So I think it's very important that we give them the opportunity to do that. That is an essential part of the education process. That is critical literacy. So, it's very important, and I applaud the teachers for doing the work. What I tell teachers in these tough times is that even if the books are banned from the schools, we must educate ourselves so that we can be the book.
Mm.
We've got to be the book. That's what these times call for. Um, if we can't take the book we might not be able to take the book in the classroom, but we can take the knowledge that we have into the classroom and teach with confidence. One thing have found over the years is that even though I'm writing for children who are my intended audience, and I discovered this when my book about Fannie Lou Hamer, the Fannie Lou Hamer biography, Voice of Freedom, came out, that many adults don't know about these topics. So I found that my books are really doing double duty, teaching not only the intended audience of children, but teaching the educators at the same time. And when you teach a parent or an educator, uh, you teach generations.
Yeah.
So, the impact is exponential. So I
Mm.
think it's very important that we educate ourselves, particularly in these times, because knowing your history is generational wealth. And that is something that we need to give to our children, that the knowledge of a knowledge of a more inclusive history that includes people of color rather than excludes them or trivializes or diminishes our contributions.
Mm.
One thing I've been saying recently is that at a time when our history is being erased in some sectors, that our heroes are too legendary to hide. Our pain is too deep to dismiss or diminish, and our history is too epic to erase. So, it's very important that we empower our children with that history.
Mm, yes, it is. I'm going to have to quote you uh, in many sessions going forward that knowing our history is generational wealth. I love that. And I love the idea of educators becoming the book. It reminds me of the book Fahrenheit 451, where the government burns all the books, but people memorize and,
Yeah,
and pass it on.
right.
Uh,
And the movie, The Book of Eli, as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that which had that strange twist where you don't know until the end that Denzel Washington's character Eli is blind, but he's memorized the books.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean it's very important. You can't it's hard to you can't I always say you can't teachers can't teach what they don't know. Parents can't pass on what they don't know. So it's really important that uh more educators like you do the work.
Mm.
It's important work. Children are the most important audience, the most important readers. That's why I feel so wonderful about being able to write for children, even though that was not my intent when I set my sights on becoming an author.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's wonderful. And I know I've learned right alongside my kids from your book, so I can attest to them doing double duty. Thank you so much. And we just have time for one last question. Just anything that you want to leave all of these educators with today, because it's a hard time to be a teacher. It's always hard to be underpaid and overworked, but it is especially hard right now to be underpaid and overworked and to be in the crosshairs of the federal government and to have to worry about everything you're saying. And the attacks that are coming down are fast and furious. And I am incredibly inspired by the teachers here that even in some of them are teaching in states where it's illegal to teach Black history, and they are linking arms and supporting each other anyway. And so I just wanted to ask you what words you could leave with them uh, to.
I'm gonna think about, some of my own teachers. I began school um, before school desegregation. I didn't grow up in the South. I grew up in, well, not the deep South. I grew up in Baltimore, which, maybe borderline Mason, the Mason-Dixon line, as you know, runs through Maryland. But my teachers were like you. They were extremely resourceful. And I think all teachers are resourceful. Teachers buy their own supplies. I mean, what other professionals have to buy their own supplies and bring them to the workplace? Nobody. Nobody is expected to do that. But teachers do that year after year after year. And, amidst all kinds of changes, and pressures to teach to the test. And now they've got to be careful what they say and, censor certain subjects. But, you are brave. You are resilient. You know how to resist. You are remarkable. And you bring me joy. You bring me joy.
Oh, that's just so beautiful. I can't think of a better way to celebrate their work than having brought you here and ending with those words. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
And,
you, teachers.
um, and just take a second to unmute and say thank you to Carol. Give your shout outs now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing your love with Carol. And we have study groups all over the country who meet monthly, and we're going to hear briefly from three of the groups as part of this wonderful celebration that we're holding today. And I should say that it is fortuitous that we're holding this celebration also on the 100th birthday of Malcolm X. So we can all raise our glasses and a toast to Malcolm X today as well and celebrate teachers who are continuing the legacy of Malcolm X by teaching the truth and teaching the truth about race and racism in this country. So I am very happy to welcome this afternoon Tonette Campbell, also Fortunato Lim, and Shanti Earl. Thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your lessons from your year with us. We're going to begin with Tonette. Can you tell us about a reading discussion that made a memorable or impactful study group meeting this year? We'll go Tonette, and then Fortunato can hop in, and then Shanti.
Hello, I'm Tonette, and I would say that one of our most impactful discussions happened just after Trump was reelected. We had been reading selections that examined the cyclical nature of racial progress and backlash, and the conversation organically turned to what we call the equity pendulum. We drew parallels between the Reconstruction era, when gains by Black Americans were quickly met with violent resistance, like the rise of the KKK and voter suppression, and our current moment. We also connected the election of Barack Obama to the rise of Trump's presidency. It was powerful to link these patterns to what we were teaching our students and to affirm why it's critical to remain vigilant. And that conversation reminded us how essential it is to have spaces like this to process, reflect, and strategize together.
All right, thanks, Tonette. Hi, everyone. It's Fortunato joining you from Treaty 1 territory here. Because we were new to this journey together, the poem Two Sets of Notes by M.K. Asante provided a strong, meaningful starting point for the Teaching for Black Lives text. It served as a powerful entry into conversation, not only within our study group, but also among our broader school staff. This reading led to meaningful conversations about the disconnect between school curricula and students' lived experiences. One of our administrators, she's actually here as well, so shout out to Harpreet, found a piece so impactful that she brought it back to her own school and used it with her staff. She later shared how it sparked a shift in thinking about curriculum design and delivery, challenging her team to consider how they might make learning more affirming and inclusive for racialized students. It was one of those moments where the text and our conversations didn't just stay in the study group, it traveled, influenced, and transformed other spaces too.
Thank you, Fortunato and Tonette, for sharing those ideas. I will say one particular reading that my students really enjoyed was Baldwin's A Talk to Teachers. We read that alongside Delpit's work, Lessons from Teachers. So you have this academic piece, and we're also learning from this piece, this well-written piece by Baldwin. And what really struck them and seemed so relevant was this, how both of these authors addressed the urgency, right, of using education as a tool of social change. So it was great for them to see, hey, this was written about way before now, and teacher education isn't enough just about teaching about curriculum, but right, it has to be more impactful. It has to be social justice focused, and they have a moral responsibility, right? We always talk about morality. We were having all these great conversations around that, but they have a moral responsibility, right, to emphasize and challenge oppressive systems as educators and as teachers. They were really struck by how Baldwin was raw, unapologetic call for action, and also how Delpit aligned greatly with that. So that particular reading really touched them and really engaged them in ways to really think about, I'm a new teacher, I'm approaching this profession. How do I make my teaching, my instruction so impactful that it calls my students to action? So I would say the whole book, but that piece in particular really resonated for us and my students.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing those stories. What an incredible year. And you know, Julia and I got to sit in with many study groups throughout the year and hear stories like these, and we know the power of the work that all you are doing. So when we're up here praising y'all, it's not empty praise. Y'all really are doing the work to change this country, to empower young people to be part of that change as well. And I wanted to just ask y'all one more question. What has been the biggest benefit of hosting a Teaching for Black Lives study group? And maybe we can begin with Tonette and then Fortunato, and then Shanti can take us home.
Sure. So for our group, the biggest benefit, or for me and my co-facilitator, the biggest benefit of hosting a Teaching for Black Lives study group has been the community. It's a space where we as educators of color can speak openly, share resources, encourage each other to resist, to be able to reimagine things or reimagine how we are in this world and just feel seen. We're not just talking about equity, we're living it, teaching it, and finding joy and healing through it. It's been very restorative for us, collaborative, and also deeply grounding.
Thank you, Tonette. I would echo some of the things you said there as well in regards to the community. Really intentional time that we carved out together to engage in honest, meaningful dialogue rooted in the text of the Teaching for Black Lives, but also deeply connected to our live experiences as educators, our daily life in the school, in the classroom. Although a number of us are racialized educators, none of our members identify as part of the Black community. So the group became a meaningful space to explore what it means to be an ally to our Black students and our Black families and colleagues as well. Together, we work to build a deeper awareness, accountability, and action in support of Black students, families, and colleagues. For example, after engaging with the text and discussing issues of anti-Blackness in schools, several members of our group advocated for changes to classroom practices, school-wide policies such as revisiting disciplinary procedures that impact Black students, incorporating more Black authored texts into English and social studies, but also within the classroom library and also school library. We initiated conversations with colleagues about how to better represent Black histories and lived experiences throughout the year, not just during Black History Month in February here. These actions grew directly from our learning and collective reflection, transforming the group into a space of both support and responsibility. So with each meeting, we grew closer not only as colleagues, but as co-conspirators committed to the work of Teaching for Black Lives.
Yes, wonderful. All right, Shanti, take us home.
Yeah, and thinking about the benefits of this study group, and you've all touched on it, this idea of creating community. Because oftentimes you feel like in the work is difficult and you're by yourself, you're alone, you're in that building, you're in that district, but being able to not only be in community within our university setting, but also to come to these larger sessions where they hear from the authors who are writing, who are doing this history, and then layered with these various curriculum activities. So really, this whole experience gave them the blueprint of how to do it in the classroom and what it looks like when you incorporate in a community space. You bring in authors, you bring in people from the community, you engage and connect with other educators. And I really think that was what was so beneficial and great about this, that my students had a community of learners and teachers that they were engaged with who could support them, right? So they exchanged with some of the other teachers. And I know one of my students said, Dr. Earl, I'm connecting with somebody in Maryland. I was like, somebody in Maryland, right? And so it's this idea that this community is an expansive in their teaching journey, and that they can navigate their own classrooms with strength, with resilience, because they have others who they are in working in community with and doing this work. So that was it for us. Yeah.
I mean, this theme of building community just ran through all of your comments, and there's nothing more powerful than community. That's why powerful forces are trying to disrupt community. That's why they're trying to pit us against each other. That's why they're trying to get us to hate immigrants or LGBTQ plus folks or black folks, right? And y'all are showing how we are going to defeat them by building community and refusing to be silenced, refusing to cower in fear. And I know it's not easy. You know, I know some of the study group meetings, not enough members showed up that week or that month, and it was frustrating, or you missed a session. Um, you know, I know some of you had to struggle with administration to get the support you needed, right? But the fact that you showed up and kept going makes all the difference in the world. And the fact that you have built community means that when the time comes and many more people are ready to do this work, like we saw in the 2020 uprising, when all of a sudden millions of people were interested in these ideas, you will have a community that can help be the leaders, right? Because you've done the work in the hard times. You did the work in the times when other people weren't paying attention, then it'll pay off. And so thank you so much for sharing your stories. And if y'all want to drop some love in the chat for Shanti, for Fortunato, and for Tonette, please do so. Thank you for joining us this evening.